Okay, Marcia, I want to get you that update video I promised you and talk about where we are with Rocco and talk about how we're going to uh, kind of get his training to a good stopping point so we can make that bridge to get him home and get him successful. I wanted to talk in this video in particular about techniques and for how we use the remote training collar or the shock collar, the e-collar, whatever you want to call it. The important thing to remember about using a remote collar is that this does not teach the dog anything new. He doesn't magically learn something by wearing the collar. Instead, the remote collar is simply meant to replace having to wear a leash. That is the point. We are simply trying to replace wearing this by wearing this. And the point is that this collar has a range of 1 mile and never gets tangled. And the idea is if he is far away, and I know we talked about this when you were here, if he is out away from me, if he's 100 yards away from me, if I had a 100-yard long leash and I said here and pulled on the leash, he would absolutely come every time. And so the idea is we simply need to replace tugging on a leash with a tug from the remote collar. Now, it's a couple of things I always advocate when we talk about how to do what we call collar conditioning. First and foremost, we need to make sure that our equipment is working. My collars, quite frankly, seen some better days. This transmitter has been chewed up by a puppy. I've got a lot of miles I've put on this. I've used a lot of dogs and used this for a long time, and very happy with it. But mine has certain functions on it. The one that I suggested you order is very similar, although the transmitter, the buttons are in different places. That's really about the difference. And this one can do multiple dogs at one time. It can do a couple other things to do some auxiliary electronics and whatnot, but that's neither here nor there. Now, what matters is I want to show you how we always test the collars. The first thing, I'm going to turn it on, and you can hear it. And so knowing that it's on is an important first step. And this one, mine produces a tone, so I want to make sure the tone's working. So my tone's working. And then what I'm going to do is I am going to test the collar to make sure that its functions are working for stimulation. Now, this one in particular I like because it has a vibrate function. So I turn it all the way to V for vibrate. And if you actually listen carefully, you can actually hear it vibrating. So vibrating is a great option because it doesn't apply any electronic stimulation. It's very consistent, and it helps get the dog's attention without applying any actual electronic pressure. Now, we obviously want to condition him to electronic pressure. And what that means is we need to figure out what level of stimulation does he respond to. Every dog is different. So some dogs respond to very low stimulation, and some dogs don't even flinch until you get to a high level stimulation. And so what we want is we are looking for the lowest level of electronic stim where the dog reacts. When I say reacts, I mean looks to the side, flips their ear, something to let me know that they felt it. Okay, we should never have to use the collar to punish the dog, to where the dog is screaming or crying or wailing or something like that. That means in that case the dog is confused and does not understand why they are being stimulated. We don't use the collar to punish them. We're trying to use the collar to communicate with the dog at a distance. Now, it's also important, and I do this every day, every single time when I use this, I try to do it the same way. I actually use the electronic stimulation on myself before I ever put this on a dog. And so what I mean is I turn this to the level that is where I know what it should feel like, so I can actually start at 1. But honestly, on a 1, the lowest level on this particular collar, if I put it on my forearm right here and I push the button on 1, I can't even feel it. There, I barely felt. So mine has a level 1 and low, medium, high. I barely felt 1 medium. Barely. 1 high, that I felt. I could kind of feel that. Yeah. It's something like If you've ever licked like a one like a double A battery, you can kind of just barely feel a tickle. That's what it feels like. Now, usually the level where I get a response from dogs is on level 2 with the way mine is set up. And so on level 2 is where I spend most of the time with most dogs because it is enough that they will feel, but it is not enough that is going to cause pain. So I'm going to put a level 2 right here on my forearm where I was before. And I can definitely feel a tingle down my arm. So that was low 2, medium 2, high 2. I definitely can feel those. Now, again, no pain, but we can feel that it's a flicking sensation is the best way to describe it if you've never tried it. I highly recommend, I tell this to everybody that I recommend getting an e-collar. Use it on yourself so you know what it feels like before we put it on the dog. Because there are also situations where if your collar is malfunctioning and for some reason, say it, thought you sent the highest level of stimulation when you thought it was lower, you need to know that before you put it on the dog. We would definitely prefer that we feel that sensation before we put it on the dog and then confuse the dog because they receive the wrong level of correction. Now, Rocco is kind of a little angel because he sits here so peacefully, like such a good boy. And so I want to show you how we put this on the dog. So I'm actually going to tilt my camera down just a little bit because he's being so good right here. Okay, and so when we do this, the collar has 2 prongs that come up, right? And what we want to do when we put this on the dog, it's very different than putting on the flat collar. The flat collar, you should be able to get your hand in here, and be able to, it should have plenty of slack, right? So that one can stay on there pretty loose. When we put the e-collar on, it needs to be snug, not choking the dog, but snug. So, and what I do is I'm going to set the collar over here kind of under his jaw on the side of his neck. I don't like to put it straight under their chin, right in their trachea, because we don't want those prongs going in and really making him a great deal of discomfort when there shouldn't be. So I set the collar receiver over here, kind of right over here on the side. Um, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to tighten this down, and you'll feel it get snug. And again, you don't want it like choking him, but you'll get to where you can feel it should be tight. And you want to put your fingers in there and make sure that you can feel those prongs up against it. And a lot of times, if he doesn't respond to stimulation, that may mean that the collar is loose or has wiggled or moved or something. But then we want to make sure that we use the extra buckle spot so we make sure that collar stays in place and gives us a consistent result. That is a key important part of doing really any dog training is we want to be consistent. We don't want him to have a different level of stimulation when he does something differently. Also, there will be times of the year where you will have to readjust your collar, especially when he sheds his coat, because that collar has to get through the fur and touch his skin. So we want to make sure that those electrodes are making it into through his coat and able to touch his skin, so that it gives him a consistent response. Okay, so when we e-collar condition a dog, what this means is I told you that we need to not teach him anything new, but instead we need to simply use it to help reinforce what he already knows. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the stuff that he already knows. And instead of using only the leash, we're going to use the leash and the e-collar at the same time. And so I'm going to start off on vibrate, and then I'll go up to 1 and then go up to 2. And if I have to, I'll go up to 3. My collar actually goes up to a 7. I don't think I've ever seen a dog that I needed to go higher than like a 4. I've had some that were just really high that take a lot of stimulation. This is literally the first time I've put Rocco on the collar, or I'm going to use electronic stim, and I can almost guarantee he's going to be low because Rocco he's sensitive, like he's not defiant and difficult. So almost always this type of dog needs very little electronic stimulation. In fact, I'd be willing to bet the vast majority of the time you can use tone and vibrate and he will respond to that at a distance. So here's what I mean. Come on, bud. Come on. Come on. Good boy. So we're just going to walk around like we normally would. And what I'm going to do is when I say SIT, I am going to lift the leash and apply electronic stimulation at the same time. Okay, now, it's very difficult. One of the hard things to know about a video is when do I push the button and when do I not push the button. So what I will do when I do this video, I will try to do this motion like this when I push the button so that you can see my arm come out to indicate pushing the button, pushing the button, pushing the button. Okay, so what we're going to do, let's just walk a little bit. Good boy. Good. And we're going to start with vibrate here. Sit. And you saw how he just looked around. He just looked around like, what the heck was that? Right? So that is the kind of response we're looking for, where he went, huh? That's perfect. So that's good. And I did all that at the same time. Said the word, lifted the leash, vibrated the collar. So this is the way dogs learn, is classical conditioning, right? Trying to condition sitting and vibrating at the same time. All right. That's a good boy. Let's go. Let's go. Sit. And again, you saw him look to the side like, what was that? Sit. That's okay. We're a little bit confused right here. Good boy. Good sit. Good. Good boy. Good. I know I'm off the edge of the camera here. Good boy. Good. Okay, let's try it a little bit with the H-E-R-E word. Rocco, here. Sit. Good boy. A great response there. He sat nicely. He still looked like, what was that? But he sat down nicely. And you'll notice when he's looking to the left. That's because the collar's on the left side of his neck. So he's feeling that vibration and he's looking like, is there something over there? Which is fine. Again, simply looking for a response, not looking for him to be confused, or certainly don't want him to be uncomfortable. Good boy. Rocco, here. Sit. Good boy. And I'm applying the vibration when I say here and when I say sit. So he is feeling that twice. So every time, again, just the same time that I would pull on the leash is when I am applying the stimulation. Good boy. We can see how nicely he's sitting here. He's sitting here like a little angel. He's such a good boy. Yes, you are. You're such a good boy. Good. Okay. So this gives you the basics for e-collar conditioning. I'm going to do a video, and I know I'm actually running out of days pretty quick. So what we're going to do is we're going to work on this. I'll probably do, I think we can go ahead and take this outside because he's done a lot of work outside lately, and he seems to be responding well to the collar. We're going to take this outside probably for the rest of our time, for the rest of this week, because I think we're like here at the end of the month, we're running out of days. But I think he is learning this very well and very quickly. I'm very happy with his progress. So all in all, I think Rocco is doing great. The e-collar conditioning, I think, is going excellent. Sitting here like such a good boy. Good. That's a good boy. Good sit. Good. Good sit. And I kind of put my hand up like a traffic cop. Sit. Good boy. Good. Rocco, all done. Good boy. Again, we're trying to work on that as you work him in. All in all, though, he's doing great.